Tom Reed stepped off the transport shuttle onto the gleaming metal floor of Docking Bay 17. He adjusted the worn strap of his duffel bag and gazed upward. The vast ceiling of Nexus Station arched hundreds of meters overhead, crisscrossed with transport tubes and maintenance walkways. "So this is it," he muttered to himself. Nexus Station was the pride of the Galactic Alliance, a massive hub where 17 different species lived, worked, and traded. Humans were among the newest members, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 30 years ago. The station's smooth, curved walls and perfectly balanced systems reflected the engineering mastery of its primary architects, the Varrock. A tall, blue-skinned alien approached Tom. The Varrock had 4 arms and skin that shimmered like polished metal under the bay's bright lights. "Human Engineer Reed." The Varrock's voice was clear but tinged with something Tom recognized all too well: mild disdain. "That's me." Tom extended his hand, then awkwardly pulled it back when the Varrock made no move to reciprocate the human greeting. "I am Chief Engineer Krell. You have been assigned to Maintenance Team 12. Your credentials were sufficient for the position." Krell's upper set of arms held a digital tablet while the lower pair remained clasped behind his back. "Follow me." Tom hurried to keep pace with Krell's long strides. They passed through crowded corridors where beings of all shapes and sizes moved with purpose. Tom noticed how the crowds parted for Krell. The Varrock were respected, feared, even. "Your species has only recently developed rudimentary space travel," Krell remarked as they entered a transport tube. "The fact that humans were granted a position here is generous." Tom bit his tongue. His application had included designs that had won him top awards on Earth. But here, among the stars, human achievements were considered quaint at best. The transport tube deposited them in Engineering Section 7, a vast room filled with holographic displays and workstations. Various aliens worked at control panels, but Tom noticed most were Varrock. "This is Team 12. Krell gestured to a small workstation in the corner. "You will handle basic maintenance issues, nothing critical. Your species' understanding of advanced physics is still developing." 2 other engineers looked up, a squat, gray-skinned pulsar with 6 eyes and a reptilian drex. Neither seemed particularly impressed by Tom's arrival. "This is Megan Talon," Krell said. "They will show you your duties." Tom nodded politely. "Looking forward to working with you both." Krell's upper eyes narrowed slightly. "A final reminder, Human Reed. Nexus Station operates on Varrock engineering principles. Your Earth methods are not welcome here. We have refined our approach over 10,000 years." After Krell departed, Tom settled at his workstation. The interface was standard enough, though the symbols took concentration to decipher. "Don't mind Krell," said Talon, the reptilian engineer. "The Varrock treat everyone that way." "I'm used to it," Tom replied, pulling up the station schematics. His eyes moved quickly over the designs, noticing patterns and connections that others might miss. It was what made him good at his job back on Earth, seeing how systems fit together in ways that weren't obvious. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the section. Engineers rushed to terminals as red warning lights flashed. "What's happening?" Tom asked. Mig's 6 eyes blinked rapidly. "Power regulation failure in Section 3. It's spreading to connected systems." Tom watched as the Varrock engineers frantically worked the controls. Despite their advanced technology, they looked confused, almost panicked. On Tom's screen, he could see something they couldn't: a pattern in the failure. It wasn't random at all. Tom's fingers hovered over his controls. He had seen something like this before, back on Earth. But would anyone listen to the new human engineer? The emergency meeting chamber buzzed with tension. 20 engineers, mostly Varrock, gathered around a circular holographic display showing Nexus Station's failing power systems. Red warning indicators spread like a virus through the station's schematics. Chief Engineer Krell stood at the center, his 4 arms gesturing at various sections of the display. "The primary power regulation system is destabilizing at an accelerating rate. We estimate total failure within 14 days. Tom Reed sat in the back row, watching quietly. He'd spent the last 3 days studying the station's systems during his off hours. Something about the pattern of failures bothered him. It didn't match what the Varric engineers were describing. "We must replace the entire regulatory array," announced Krell. "It will require specialized materials from the Varric homeworld and approximately 62 days to implement." The station commander, a tall, silver-skinned being named Rax, frowned. "We don't have 62 days, Chief Engineer. Half the station will be without life support in 2 weeks." "There is no alternative," Krell insisted, his upper set of arms folded across his chest, a Varric gesture of certainty. The regulatory systems were designed to be replaced as complete units. This is standard Varric engineering practice. Tom's hand rose almost without him realizing it. "The human wishes to speak," Rax noted, surprise evident in his voice. All eyes turned to Tom. He stood, suddenly aware of how small he looked compared to the Varric engineers. "I've been studying the failure patterns," Tom began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "The problem isn't with the regulatory array itself. It's with the feedback loop between the power nodes." Krell's skin darkened, a sign of irritation. "Impossible. Varric power systems do not suffer from feedback degradation." Tom tapped his tablet, sending data to the main display. "Look at these readings. Every failure follows a specific sequence. It's not component failure, it's resonance." The display changed to show Tom's analysis, a pulsing rhythm visible in the power fluctuations that no one had noticed before. "The regulatory system is working exactly as designed," Tom continued. "But it's fighting against itself because the baseline calibration is responding to an echo effect between modules." One of the younger Varric engineers leaned forward, studying the pattern. "This cannot be correct. Our systems are designed with perfect efficiency." "That's actually the problem," Tom explained. "The system is too perfect. On Earth, we learned that some inefficiency creates stability. It's like how a suspension bridge needs flexibility to withstand strong winds." A wave of dismissive murmurs swept through the room. Krell stepped forward, his voice louder now. "This human suggests we deliberately introduce inefficiency into our precision systems. This is absurd. This is why humans are still exploring their own solar system, while we have mastered galactic travel." Laughter rippled through the Varric engineers. Tom stood his ground, though his cheeks flushed red. "I can build a modulator that will correct the resonance pattern," he said. "It would take 2 days, not 62, and use materials already available on the station, and risk the entire station on human primitive engineering." Krell scoffed. "Commander Rax, we cannot waste time on this foolishness." The commander studied Tom's data for a long moment. The room fell silent. "Our situation is desperate," Rax finally said. "Chief Engineer Krell, begin preparations for your replacement plan." Tom's shoulders slumped, but then Rax continued. "However, Engineer Reed will be given 48 hours to demonstrate his solution. If it shows promise, we will pursue it. If not, we continue with the Varric plan." Krell's skin darkened to a deep blue. "This is an insult to Varric engineering tradition. This is a matter of survival," Rax replied sharply. "Engineer Reed, you have 48 hours. Begin immediately." Tom nodded, aware of the hostile stares from the Varric engineers. He had 2 days to prove that Earth engineering had something valuable to offer, or confirm every prejudice the advanced aliens held against humans. Tom wiped sweat from his forehead as he sorted through a pile of discarded parts in Maintenance Bay 4. The room was officially listed as decommissioned storage, a fancy term for the station's junk heap. No one had questioned why a human would want to work here. "Perfect," he muttered, pulling out a twisted piece of metal that had once been part of a coolant regulator. Most engineers would see trash, but Tom saw potential. He carried his find to a workbench he'd cleared in the corner. Already, an odd collection of salvaged components covered the surface. Power cells with minor defects, connectors from outdated systems, and cooling units from species environments no longer represented on the station. The door hissed open. Tom looked up, expecting to see Krell come to mock him again. Instead, a slender alien with pale green skin entered. She had 4 eyes set in a diamond pattern and delicate, 6-fingered hands. Engineer Reed. Her voice had a musical quality. I am Mira, from Power Distribution Section 8. Tom nodded cautiously. Can I help you? I saw your presentation. She moved closer, examining the parts on his bench. The Varric engineers are saying you are wasting time. But I noticed something in your data that they missed. Tom raised an eyebrow. And what's that? The pattern you identified. It matches natural systems. My homeworld has similar patterns in our ocean currents. Her upper eyes blinked. What are you building here? Tom hesitated, then decided to trust her. Something the Varric would never approve of. A system that breaks all their rules of engineering. He gestured to his workbench. Varric engineering is about perfection, every part designed for maximum efficiency. But that's not how nature works on Earth. Our ecosystems thrive because of imperfection and adaptation. Mira picked up one of his modified power cells. You are not building a regulator, are you? Tom grinned. Not one big regulator, no. I'm building dozens of small ones that will work together, like a colony of ants or a forest ecosystem. The Varric will never accept this approach, Mira warned. They don't have to accept it. They just have to see it work. The door hissed open again. 3 Varric engineers entered, led by a junior engineer named Vex who reported directly to Krell. Human Reed, Vex said, his tone dripping with disdain. Chief Engineer Krell sent us to observe your progress. The Varric engineers snickered as they looked around the junk-filled room. You are building a solution to our power regulation crisis from garbage. Vex asked. Perhaps you should construct a primitive wheel next, or discover fire. Tom ignored their laughter. I'm good here. Thanks for checking. The human believes he can improve upon 10,000 years of Varric engineering, Vex said to his companions, with scraps. One of the other engineers picked up a component Tom had modified. This power cell has been deliberately degraded. He's making our technology worse. Put that down, Tom said, his patience wearing thin. Or what, human? The Varric dangled the component carelessly. Will you throw a stone at me? Perhaps hit me with a stick. Mira stepped forward. This is unnecessary. Engineer Reed is working within the parameters set by Commander Rax. Vex turned his attention to Mira. Your species was only admitted to the Galactic Alliance because of your natural resources. You have no place in an engineering discussion. Tom took the component back. You've had your fun. Now leave. Very well. Vex moved toward the door, but paused. By the way, access to Power Junction 12 has been restricted for maintenance. I believe you needed components from there. How unfortunate. After they left, Tom slammed his hand on the workbench. They're blocking me from the materials I need. Mira's 4 eyes showed determination. I have access to Junction 12. Tell me what you need. Tom looked at her in surprise. Why would you help me? You're risking your position. Because, she said, examining his designs, I recognize courage when I see it. And because the Varric have been wrong before. Tom stood before his workbench, surrounded by dozens of small devices he built over the last 18 hours. Each one contained modified power cells, sensor arrays, and communication modules salvaged from the station's discarded equipment. They looked crude compared to Varric technology, asymmetrical, with exposed wiring and mismatched parts. Mira entered carrying a container of nutrient paste. You need to eat, Tom. Humans require regular sustenance. Thanks, he said, taking the container without looking up from his work. Did you get those calibration readings? She nodded, projecting data from her handheld device. Power fluctuations are increasing. The Varric engineers are becoming nervous, though they won't admit it. Tom studied the readings, then adjusted something inside one of his devices. 24 hours left before I need to show results. Explain it to me again, Mira said, sitting on a crate. How does your solution differ from Varric engineering? Tom placed the device down and picked up another. Varric build perfect systems, centralized, controlled, precise. They're brilliant at it, but when something goes wrong, the whole system fails. He gestured to his collection of strange devices. Earth's natural systems work differently. Our forests don't have a central controller telling each tree what to do. Our ant colonies don't follow a master plan. Instead, simple units follow simple rules, creating complex, adaptable systems. And these devices are like your ants? Mira asked. Exactly. Each one monitors local conditions and makes small adjustments. They communicate with nearby units, sharing information. No single unit knows the whole system, but together they'll create stability through constant small corrections. The door slid open and Krell entered, flanked by two other Varric engineers. His upper eyes narrowed as he surveyed Tom's work. Commander Rax asked for a progress report, Krell said. I see you have created. He paused, searching for words. Junk. Tom straightened. I'm building a distributed regulatory network based on Earth's ecosystem principles. Krell picked up one of the devices, turning it over with obvious disgust. This primitive approach is what doomed humanity to centuries of pollution and climate instability on your home planet. That's true, Tom admitted, surprising Krell. We made serious mistakes, but we learned from them. The most stable systems are those that embrace imperfection and adaptation. Philosophical nonsense, Krell scoffed. Engineering is about precision and control. Tom took the device back from Krell. That approach works great, until it doesn't. Your system is failing because it can't adapt to changing conditions. It's too perfect. Perfection cannot be blamed for failure, one of the other Varric engineers said. Actually, it can, Tom replied. On Earth, we have a saying, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Krell's skin darkened with anger. Your primitive Earth sayings have no place here. I came to inform you that your time has been reduced. Commander Rax requires your demonstration in 12 hours, not 24. That's not enough time, Mira protested. Commander Rax did not specify which 48 hours from which to count, Krell said with false innocence. The countdown began when you first suggested your theory. After Krell left, Tom sank onto a stool, looking at the dozens of devices still needing final assembly. We can't finish in 12 hours, Mira said. It's impossible. Tom stared at his work, then at the station schematics displayed on the wall. Maybe we don't need to finish all of them. We just need enough to demonstrate the concept. He pulled up a map of the station's power distribution system. Look here, if we place units at these junction points, we could create a small-scale proof of concept. But will it be enough to convince them? Mira asked. Tom's expression hardened. It has to be. Because right now, my junk is the only thing that might save this station. The observation room fell silent as Tom activated his network of devices. On the large display screen, 20 small green dots appeared, scattered across a section of Nexus Station's power grid. These are my regulatory units, Tom explained to the small audience of station officials and engineers. Commander Rax stood at the front, arms crossed, while Krell and several Varric engineers watched from the side with obvious skepticism. Each unit monitors local power fluctuations and makes minor adjustments, Tom continued. More importantly, they communicate with each other to coordinate their responses. Mira stood beside Tom, operating a secondary control panel. She had worked through the night helping him place the units at key junction points. Begin the demonstration, Commander Rax ordered. Tom nodded and entered a command. I'm introducing a controlled power surge into this section, similar to what's happening throughout the station, but on a smaller scale. On the screen, a wave of red spread through the power lines. The observers watched as the green dots, Tom's devices, began to pulse. Data streams appeared between them, showing their communication. They're sensing the problem and sharing information, Tom explained. Now they'll begin to compensate. For a moment, it seemed to work. The red indicators receded slightly. Then, suddenly, 3 of Tom's units went dark. The power surge returned, stronger than before. Warning alarms sounded as the test section's power levels became dangerously unstable. "Shut it down," Krell demanded. "The humans' primitive devices are making it worse." Tom frantically worked the controls. "Something's wrong. They should be stabilizing the system." "Enough," Commander Rax said firmly. "Deactivate the test before it affects critical systems." With obvious disappointment, Tom shut down his remaining units. The test section returned to normal operations as backup systems took over. Krull stepped forward, his skin shimmering with what appeared to be satisfaction. "As I predicted, Commander, human engineering is not suited for our advanced systems. We have wasted valuable time on this experiment." The room began to empty as engineers returned to their stations. Commander Rax lingered, studying the now inactive display. "You have 6 hours remaining in your allotted time, Engineer Reed," Rax said quietly. "I suggest you use it wisely." When only Tom and Mira remained, Tom slumped into a chair. "I don't understand what went wrong." "The theory is sound. The units were communicating properly." Mira retrieved one of the failed units from a nearby console. She examined it carefully. Then her 4 eyes widened. "Tom, look at this." She pointed to a small burn mark on the unit's connector. This wasn't caused by power surge. This was deliberately damage. Tom took the device, examining it closely. "Sabotage. It appears so." Mira checked another unit. "This one too." The communication modules were tampered with. Tom's expression hardened. "The Varrock don't just want me to fail. They need me to fail. My solution threatens everything they believe about engineering." He stood up and began pacing. "But there's something else wrong too. Even with the sabotage, the system should have shown more stability than it did." Tom pulled up the station schematics again, studying them intently. Suddenly, he stopped. "The units are too isolated," he realized. "They're positioned at junction points, but they're not integrated deeply enough into the station's systems." His eyes lit up with renewed energy. "They need to be part of the station, not just attached to it." "But we'd need access to core systems for that," Mira pointed out. "The Varrock will never grant that access after this failure." Tom smiled for the first time since the failed test. "Who said anything about asking permission? We have 6 hours before they shut us down completely." He began gathering his remaining units. "Nature doesn't ask permission to adapt. Neither will we." Mira looked concerned but nodded. "Where do we start?" "The primary access tunnel to Power Distribution Hub 3, Tom said, already moving toward the door. "And bring those sabotaged units. We're going to need every part we can salvage." Warning lights flashed throughout Nexus Station as Tom and Mira crawled through a narrow maintenance duct. Tom carried a backpack filled with his remaining devices, while Mira led the way with a small light. "Power levels in Section 7 are dropping below critical," Mira reported, checking her handheld scanner. "Life support is failing in the residential quarters." "We need to hurry," Tom said, wiping sweat from his forehead. The station's temperature was rising as cooling systems failed. They reached a junction point where several power conduits met. Tom pulled out one of his devices and began integrating it directly into the station's systems. "This is different from the test units," Mira observed. Tom nodded as he worked. "I've redesigned them. Instead of sitting on the surface of the power grid, these become part of it, like how tree roots intertwine with fungi in a forest." Over the station's communication system, they could hear the growing panic. "All non-essential personnel evacuate levels 12 through 18, announced a controlled but strained voice. Varrock engineering teams report to emergency stations." Tom and Mira had placed 11 units at strategic points throughout the station's core systems when his communicator buzzed. "Reed." Commander Rax's voice was sharp. "Where are you?" "Your deadline expired an hour ago." "I'm fixing your station, Commander," Tom replied, continuing to work. Security reports unauthorized access to restricted areas. Is this your doing? With all due respect, Commander, your station is about to tear itself apart. I'm implementing my solution, the only one that can work in time. There was a pause. Chief Engineer Krell informs me that your interference will accelerate the failure. Of course he does, Tom muttered. Louder, he said. Commander, your choice is simple. Let me finish what I've started, or begin evacuation procedures immediately. Another pause. Then, you have 2 hours, Reed. After that, I will order a full evacuation. Tom and Mira exchanged looks of relief, but their celebration was short-lived as a violent shudder ran through the station. Primary power coupling in Hub 2 just failed, Mira reported, her 4 eyes blinking rapidly in alarm. Cascading failures throughout connected systems. We need to reach Hub 2, Tom said, gathering his tools. That's where the worst resonance pattern is centered. They crawled faster through the maintenance tunnels, emerging into a corridor filled with panicked station personnel rushing toward evacuation points. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow. When they reached Power Hub 2, they found chaos. Varric engineers worked frantically at control panels while alarms blared. In the center of the room, a massive power regulator sparked and groaned. What is he doing here? Krell demanded when he spotted Tom. Security. Wait. Commander Rax emerged from a group of officers. Engineer Reed has my authorization. Krell's skin darkened to a deep blue. Commander, this human's interference caused this disaster. The resonance pattern was growing before I ever arrived. Tom countered, moving toward the failing regulator. Your system was already failing. You just didn't want to admit it. Tom pulled out his remaining devices, only 3 left. These need to go directly into the main regulator. Absolutely not. Krell moved to block Tom. That regulator is the heart of our station. You will destroy everything. Another violent shudder rocked the station. A support beam crashed down nearby, barely missing a group of engineers. The regulator is going to fail in minutes anyway, Tom said. Let me try. Commander Rax studied Tom's face, then nodded. Do it. As Krell sputtered in protest, Tom rushed to the regulator. Its casing was hot enough to burn his hands as he worked to integrate his devices. Mira assisted, her 6-fingered hands moving with precise quickness. This is madness, Krell said, watching in horror. Varric engineering cannot be improved by human primitive tinkering. As Tom connected the final device, the regulator gave a deafening groan. The lights throughout the hub flickered and died. For a moment, complete darkness fell. Then, in the center of the hub, a soft blue glow emerged from Tom's devices as they began to communicate with the others he placed throughout the station. The blue glow spread through the power conduits of Hub 2, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost alive. Engineers and station personnel stood frozen, watching as the light traveled along pathways throughout the room, then disappeared into the walls. What's happening? Commander Rax asked, breaking the silence. Tom watched the indicators on his handheld device. They're talking to each other, all the units we placed. They're creating a new network. On the main display screen, power levels across the station began to stabilize. The warning lights stopped flashing one by one. Impossible, Krell whispered, his 4 arms hanging limply at his sides. The massive regulator at the center of the hub, which moments ago had been on the verge of catastrophic failure, hummed with renewed energy. Instead of the harsh, mechanical sound it had made before, it produced a softer tone that rose and fell in a pattern. Life support systems returning to normal, reported a technician. Power distribution equalizing across all sections. Tom smiled as more reports came in. Environmental controls restored in residential sectors. Docking bay systems online. Medical facilities at full power. Commander Rax stepped forward, examining the displays with careful attention. Not only has the crisis been averted, but power efficiency has increased by 17%. The commander turned to Tom. Explain what we're seeing, Engineer Reed. Tom gestured to the humming regulator. My devices created a distributed intelligence network. Each unit makes small adjustments based on local conditions and communicates those changes to others. They're constantly adapting, just like an ecosystem. But the resonance pattern, Krell began, is being used, not fought against, Tom interrupted. On Earth, we learned that some systems work better when they incorporate natural rhythms instead of suppressing them. My network doesn't fight the resonance, it dances with it. The room had filled with curious personnel from throughout the station. Species of all kinds crowded around, watching the miraculous recovery of systems they had believed doomed. The Varrock way is precision and control, Tom continued. But nature teaches us that resilience comes from adaptation and cooperation. He looked directly at Krell. Both approaches have value. Commander Rax studied the newly stabilized systems, then turned to address the room. Nexus Station was designed to bring together the best ideas from across the galaxy. Today, we were reminded why. The commander placed a hand on Tom's shoulder. Engineer Reed, the Station Council will convene tomorrow to discuss your permanent assignment to the Engineering Division. At senior rank, a murmur of approval spread through the crowd. Several non-Varrock engineers approached Tom with questions about his devices and theories. Krell remained apart, his skin shifting through various shades of blue as he processed what had happened. Finally, he approached Tom. Your solution defied all established Varrock engineering principles, Krell said, his voice quiet. Tom nodded. Yes, it did. And yet, Krell gestured to the functioning systems around them. It works better than our approach in this situation. Different problems need different solutions, Tom replied. The Varrock built wonders I could never design. But sometimes, a fresh perspective helps. Krell was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, he extended his upper right hand, the formal Varrock gesture of professional respect. Perhaps, Krell said, there are things we might learn from human engineering after all. 6 months later, Tom stood before a class of young engineers from 12 different species. The teaching hall overlooked the central plaza of Nexus Station, where his regulatory network had been made a permanent feature, its principles now incorporated into stations throughout the Alliance. Engineering isn't about who's most advanced, Tom told his students as he displayed images of Earth's natural systems alongside the station's technology. It's about finding the right solution for each challenge. At the back of the room, Mira smiled. Beside her sat Krell, who was taking careful notes. Today, Tom continued, we'll study how tree roots communicate through fungal networks and how we applied that principle to solve the great power crisis of Nexus Station. The students leaned forward, eager to learn how a human engineer had changed the way an entire galaxy thought about technology.